FNF. So FNF in full is Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom, and we are a German liberal foundation, and we seek to advance liberal policies in Africa and the world. So in terms of democracy and social accountability, first thing, I believe in a democratic society that our leaders, they owe us as citizens to be accountable to us by virtue of being public officials.
Okay, that was a very brief, straight to the point answer. All right, I'm going to jump to you, Paul Martin Konyango, in the farthest end of this panel. And the question that I have for you today is, it has been asked and I'm going to reiterate it. What are the parameters of accountability? So as we sit here and we say, we need leaders to be accountable to us, what are we using to measure that accountability? Is it on the basis of manifestos? Is it on progress? Is it on the constitution? What is the best way to say, this one has performed, this one amelalia masikio?
First and foremost, hello everyone. Now, when it comes to accountability, aside from the manifestos are just the ideas that leaders have of what you should expect from them, but how the sense of accountability is yoked towards you as a citizen is primarily based on the law. And the law has various provisions on how accountability can be measured and how you yourself can take part in the accountability process. The first and most important one is through the exercise of your sovereign right. So that's the election process. So you've already elected these leaders, they're there. The second bit of accountability is through Chapter 6 of the Constitution. Now this would provide like a measure on what to expect from a leader. What integrity standards must they adhere to? And also whether they conform to our national values and principles of governance that are in Article 10 of the Constitution. So that's where you find your transparency, the ability to access justice even for you as a citizen. Now the third bit, which would be much more straightforward for any citizen, is using the judicial process. And the judicial process has also various platforms in which you can exercise that right. The first of which is instituting a case. Should you find yourself too intimidated to do that, then you could also approach functions of the judiciary as enshrined under the Constitution. The first of them is the Commission on Administrative Justice, and that's always the best way for any young person, including what the last question we received. So you can lodge a complaint on any administrative issue that has been done within the halls of government. You can also petition or ask the commission to institute proceedings where you think your leaders have fallen short. Now,
I'm going to interrupt you very briefly. I see we're getting into the gist of how best to bring about accountability. But before we go, feel is a place of accessibility of data in terms of evaluating the performance of leaders so that you can be able to decide on how best you can hold them accountable. What is a place of information?
So thank you so much. I think there are a number of things that we need to think through as we talk about social accountability. Social accountability does not require any technical skill. What it simply means is that any person in the public can have a look at what's happening and give their feedback. This is how the day-to-day engagement between people and government. So some of the things that we need to look at when we are talking about social accountability is that, let's talk an example, election. When leaders come to us, they say we are going to do 1, 2, 3, 4. We need to hold them accountable based on what they promised. That is number one. So it's not about the issue that because we probably voted them in because we liked what they promised, and therefore we hold them accountable. We have to start asking them questions that you said you are going to do 10, have you been able to deliver 10? With that, we are talking about social accountability. In that process, there are also an aspect that we need to look at, and being the value for money. Yes, have they been able to deliver? Yes or no? But at what cost? Look at it in Kenya today, you realize that one kilometer of road can cost 1 billion. Yes, the leader delivered, but what was the cost? So as the members of the public, we must be able to question that as you are delivering, was it at the best cost? Were we robbed out of this project? And then finally, we are talking of issues of sustainability. We have seen the quality of work that is done, roads or facilities. And let me give a typical example from the counties where we have been working as Siasa Place. So, and probably you can also reflect in the county where you come from. You will realize that every county builds health facilities each year, but they are never staffed. So they lack drugs, they don't have staff. Why? It is easier to steal from the public by building a health facility which otherwise does not work. So as members of the public, now let me now answer the question of issues of data. The question is, now members of the public can ask themselves, we have how many health facilities and are they working, are they serving the public? That is where social accountability starts. Second thing is when we are dealing with issues of social accountability, you don't need the scientific data. You just need to objective and say, you are giving your honest and objective feedback based on services that are being delivered. So one of the critical examples that I have always seen is, for example, public officials coming to work late. They're supposed to come to the health facility at 8 a.m. Then they report at 11 and leave at 3. They go for lunch for 2 hours. So what data do you need? As long as you can confirm that this person came in at this time, how much time was robbed from the public, then that is the data that is needed for social accountability. However, it has also been professionalized by institutions where there are people who have specific skill, do research, and they're able to collect data. For this purpose, I think that one we should leave to the institution. But as I speak to the general public, I would wish to overemphasize that social accountability, the data that requires is the information that you have just to compare between the promise and delivery, and you take action. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is Karen Munyai, and I'm with TLF, Tunaweza Project Makueni Chapter. I'm also the Executive Director of Jumuisha Initiative, a youth grassroots organization. And yes, trainings have been conducted to capacity build youth to know what to ask and when to ask it. But what we've seen over time is that youth shy away from stepping up to even ask the right questions. Like you have, for example, you have the budget. You can see that this project has been funded, for example, but we still have, let me give an example of where I come from. We will have budgets that are funding, for example, lots of boreholes and sand dams and such. But if you look at the statistics even from KNBS, you'll find that more than 60% of households still fetch water in rivers. So it is a question of, so where is this, how is this dam helping us? Yes, we can see it, but approaching a public office to go ask why not is, I think, something that most youth have shied away from. And the few that I have seen stepping up do it on social media, for example, and also some do memos and write to assembly asking for questions, and most of them, they are shunned. So I don't know if it's a problem of, yes, youth are capacity built, yes, they know their rights, yes, they know what to do when, but when it gets to the other side, it's kind of not received well. Yes.
All right, thank you very much. The good thing is that we are seated here. Or do you feel like they look at the whole process and they say this is a waste of time? There's nothing that's going to come out of this entire process, so it's redundant for me to even start. What do you feel about how young people relate to issues of social accountability generally?
Oh, thank you very much. First, before I respond to that question, I think it is important I introduce myself and introduce the movement that I come from. Once again, I'm Musila John Muisio. I come from, sadly to say, the capital city of slums in the country, Kibra. And I'm the coordinator of Activista Movement Nairobi. Activista movement now is in 14 counties and we're still growing. And the movement is youth-led. Basically, what we do in these communities is to ensure, unlike traditional activism where activists had to come out and give their lives for the communities, then the communities are able today to come out for themselves and speak to issues that really affect themselves. So in regards to the question of fear, I personally do not think the young people we engage with at the movement level have shown any signs of fear, because even in recent times when we're doing CIDP development for different counties, young people have come out and asked very deliberate questions to counties without fear. However, I would say the measure of the different groups of youth in societies, we have the little privilege who have good education, better education. That alone gives them power over others who do not have such exposure to education. Look at other youths that are exposed to spaces like these ones that we are, and others who are not. So they're even not sure what to do when given an opportunity to talk somebody out there. So it is that classifications that will actually either give power to some youths and deny power to others. But in regards to the ones that are already out here, I do not see any fear, and that is why you're always seeing movements come up, like the social justice movement is always out there in societies fighting for the right cause in their respective societies. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Paul, I'm going to just get back to you so that we can finish the first conversation that we had begun that I think was very riveting. You talk about all these things that should happen, and so as it stands, Cabinet and Parliament have failed to meet the 2/3 threshold. Constitution says, dissolve that Parliament, go back to the polls and start again. You have issues of, timely presentation of, things. So there's a lot of issues that we feel are problematic to young people, yeah? And you had begun on expounding on what are some of the avenues. So help us understand better. When it comes to parliamentarians, everybody here has an MC, everybody here has an MP. I don't like that MP. They have been coming to the office at 11. What do I do about it?
First, when it comes to that whole accountability process, we must realize that the law has devolved the ways in which you can exercise accountability. The first one is through the political process, whereby citizens can exercise their right of recall, where you as a collective within your particular ward are dissatisfied with your MCAs or your various leaders, you can through your collective actions actually recall them back and institute another electoral process. That's the first one. However, I must also admit that the political process has a lot of bureaucratic limitations. For example, you need to petition the High Court, and then once the case is there, that's when you can initiate the right of recall. But other than that, there are still other mechanisms now falling properly within the legal mechanisms. For example, if it's a corruption issue, then you have the Anti-Corruption Commission. You could always petition them. And the petition process for these commissions is not too complicated. In fact, most of the time when you reach out to them with an issue, they pick up the matter and take it forward as far as they can. The other one which I was talking about was the CAJ, or the Office of the Ombudsman. Now, through the Office of Ombudsman, you can administrative issues within the political structure, such as your MCA is perpetually late, or your MCA is not accountable to the resources in which the county has entrusted him with, then you could also, through the Office of the Ombudsman, bring these people to court. And I think what's very important for all of us citizens to realize is this, that our sovereign power does not just stop at the ballot when we first initiate the electoral process, but it's an underpinning throughout the entire constitution and throughout all of our laws. And exercising it does not just require someone to come and tell you that this is what you should do, but it also requires a bit of involvement on your part. You as a concerned citizens, what do you seek to understand about how your own laws work and how these processes work? And I think for us like this, they serve a good purpose, but it also stops with us as young people. How much of what we're supposed to do we actually understand?
how much do we actually know? And I think that's why it's important to be in space level or any other level you're involved in, to engage young people in trying to make them understand the substance of accountability and how best to be active in democracy.
Okay, so as FNF, we have been fortunate enough to work with organizations such as the Youth Serving Consortium, and actually Siasa Place is one of our partner as the youth partner. And the current project that we want to actually implement in different counties is in terms of the scorecard, just to be able to monitor the current leaders. So this is what they promised. Have they been able to actually implement this under the certain period that they've said? So partnering with organizations that actually work with youth, and I've also been fortunate enough, like in my previous job, I've been able to work with the social justice movement, and specifically we've been able to work with Kiamaiko Social Justice Center, there's Mukuru Social Justice Center, and also Dandora, in terms of social accountability and the budgeting process. So for the young people, just to empower them with the tools that they use. So the 3 different areas were, some of it were the citizen journalism. How can they be able to document these processes? There was the public interest litigation. So we were able to take them through the process of writing petition and just demanding as the right holders, just to demand right from their duty bearers. Let's say, for example, in the budget cycle, were they able to participate in the public participation process? Do they know what are the really interests that their ward or even their MCA in their community? What are their interests, and have they actually been implemented, so they can be able to follow through their scorecards? There's also the pets, that different tools that they can be able to use to actually follow through the social accountability process.
All right, I think that's very commendable. I'm going to jump to you, Ken. The other question...
I think there are a lot of things that young people have been able to do. Typically, allow me to share some of the experience we've had in some of the counties that we work in. So out of the normal engagements that we had, let's say Kericho, where Victor was in the first panel, where we realized that most of the school had very bad washrooms, and then now the young people, we were able to train them, and young people were able to pick it as an issue. We were able to initiate a social media campaign where every leader in the 30 wards were able to identify the school next to their home, just take a photo of the status of the toilets, and then share. And then now we initiated weekly discussions based on that, looking into different perspectives. Within 3 months, we were able to identify 18 schools with very bad toilets. But then after we initiated weekly discussion, the first week we were looking at the risks involved, second, the issues of hygiene, third, issues of finance and cost. And in 3 months, the schools were able to build 8 schools were able to build the toilets. So based on that, you can see that there's some capacity and young people are able to do that. Subsequently, you realize that other people have been able to copy the same and they are doing it. Let's move to Busia, where there were issues of young people complaining about some health facilities or lack of water in some facilities. A simple thing as just writing a petition, and things are being corrected. So you realize that the reason why probably somebody might think, which is also not true, that young people are not doing some work, they're doing a great job. It's only that, one, most of the young people are not aware that they have the right, and the fact that if they ask, they have the right to be responded to. Number 2 is because probably our priorities, you'll realize that most of the young people are probably looking for job and other things. And then now they just try to think and say, okay, we have given the MCA the responsibility of watching over us. And then they leave it to the MCA, who probably is a beneficiary of the same process. So there are a lot of work that young people are doing. I know there's issues of capacity in terms of some of the young people who probably are interested are not aware that they can act, but those who are aware are already doing something that is commendable, and we just need to support them to proceed.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to go to ELF very quickly, and then we can wind up with Musila with one last question. ELF, Karen, with the briefest sentences, you can see the MC standing over me, the briefest sentences, how do you feel you have incorporated technology to accommodate more young people in your structures of training at ELF?
Most of our trainings, if not physical, they're done online, right? And at least we get to have numerous participants coming in, and the responses to the trainings that we've had are working. Because I think being the young people who are, being a digital time, yes, sorry. I mean, the only thing that we can do is just embrace technology for more reach, for more people to loop in. And like someone said, that youth will always be on the screens. So if you want to get more of them, we go to the screens. And it has really worked over time.
All right, so I'm just going to go to the last question. We can't do a lot of follow-up because of time constraints. And I'm going to ask you, Musila, we have had a lot of English from Paul Martin about, you write petitions and you do all this. But I'm going to ask you, from a very practical level, seeing that you've built up an organization around young people, what is it that one person can do? These people didn't come here as a crowd. When this crowd disperses, watenda nyumbani moja moja, what can they do in their own individual capacities to hold leaders accountable or to advance some type of societal change?
I think in one word I would just say speak. Just say speak. And the reason why I say speak is because you realize where there are no conversations, then there is nothing that can actually happen. If your MC has not done anything and we're not talking about it, he even does not know whether he's not done anything. He only has to hear it from people. So I mean, let every single person be aware. I had somebody mention a concerned citizen. Just be alive to the things happening within your constituency, within your ward, and speak to them. You might not speak it to the elected representative, you might not speak it to the government, but speak it to the next person. Because now that builds collective power. The more people are speaking to the same cause, the more they are agitated to ask the authorities. So it is just one word again, speak.
All right, speak it is. I'm going to hand over back to the MC to get us questions from the audience. Do we have questions for the panelists? Yes, we have one.
My name is Robin Karani. I have a question for the panel as whole. You can choose who will answer this. And I wanted to ask the question of how do you deal with the Kipindi syndrome in our social accountability? What I mean by the Kipindi syndrome is that you find that you will be looking after a project. That project is being seen everywhere, but in real science, it's not helping the people. Kelly will agree with me, once we went to Kericho, we found them with centers of excellence. They had changed vocational training to centers of excellence, and they would put machines, but those machines would be closed for the entire time they are studying in their worn out classes until kukuja wageni ndio zinafunguliwa tukuje tuone. So for you, you might be looking at it as the program has been done and there's something to show for it, but it's actually not benefiting the beneficiaries. So in terms of social accountability, how do you go above that and not get into conflict now with the politicians? Because the person who is responsible for that is a political mind who does not want to be beaten in terms of amepiga kipindi. That's my question.
Performative development.
So thank you. My name is Daniel Mau. I represent AYLF from K Small Group. So I have two questions for the panel, and one is about compromise institutions like the judiciary and even elections. My good friend over there said that the people have the power to exercise social accountability through avenues such as elections. We have experienced situations where elections are compromised. We wholeheartedly, you will choose a leader, and then that leader will emerge as the loser. So what happens when institutions and processes are compromised? To my second question, the knowledge is power. And knowledge comes from information. What happens if the citizens over there, including the youths, now that we are talking about the youths, are not informed? What actions are there to ensure that these people are informed of various rights that they have and reaching these people? And again, I think one of you should correct this, that these elected officials act as just overseers. There is the administrative branch that we the citizens, and I'm speaking for the mass, that do not know that it exists. When there is a problem with a road somewhere, someone will just go for the MCA, and then MCA, having known that he has only 3 roles, he may not respond directly to the query or something. So what happens? What is the government doing to ensure that civic education is done? And now, what happens if institutions are compromised? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The youth have been speaking, and that's why you see, like, most of them are have been organizing mass actions. So at what point do we say that enough is enough? Because now our power of speech does not work in our country. So what next after our speaking does not yield fruits?
Thank you so much. My name is Abib Omar. Basically, I'll appreciate it. Thank you so much. You've talked about the component, the instrument we can be able to use to hold our leaders accountable. But maybe my concern is, how do we deal with the issue of divide and rule? Because that is what politicians have mastered so much. I'll appreciate what Chinaman is saying, that young people are pushing themselves and doing a lot within the community level. But here is a situation where you are dealing with a politician who do not want an informed and educated young person around them. And the moment you keep on creating awareness, you become the target. Secondly, we are dealing with a mass that do not even understand the responsibility of the leaders they're electing, and a mass that only knows that their responsibility ended at the ballot box. So how do we address this concern? Because basically, and when you're talking about young people, there are 2 classes of young people. People who are maybe informed, educated, and know how this system works. And now there is those who they don't care. People will say that Baba read the Constitution for us, you see. So how do we deal with that? Because we are talking about the unity for purpose. Us as young people rallying together and coming together and pushing this forward. So how do we address that?
It's in moments like this when people of my profession are put in the spot that we actually get to see things in their true light. The first that I have to admit is that there is always a disconnect between the law and what the people actually expect of the law. And this disconnect is usually at a small level. And this small level, some have codified it in terms of public involvement, others have codified it in terms of the willingness of the people to actually know the laws that actually govern them. So I'll speak on that first without taking too much time. Now, when you look at, for example, the structures, the present legal structures that we have as a country, civic education is usually undertaken in the initial stages before a law comes into force. For example, Constitution of Kenya 2010, for those who could remember, the wide civic education took part during that time before the referendum. Now, post the referendum, there is a sort of ignorance that the law imposes upon itself, and this ignorance is based on this, that every single citizen now has the duty, and they are aware of that duty, to go out and learn what they should based on what the law informs them. Now, I'm not saying that's the best way to go about it, but the problem we have with that is that civic education has now been relegated to private NGOs, functions that should essentially be those of government. But I can tell you of one thing that I know is still ongoing when it comes to civic education, and this is the community paralegals. It is a very devolved system. Partly there is government support, but to a greater extent, it's mostly NGOs, about over 50 of them that run the avenue. So these are people who have been trained, and most of the time when they go out into marginalized areas of Kenya, their primary focus is on dispute resolution. So as a youth and also as a panelist, I recognize that that is a big fault over there. And that's why before we can legislate further on how civic education should be done, the burden now rests upon us. Those of us who are actually educated, who can actually access this information. Once laws have been passed in Parliament, the presumption is that every single citizen knows and has the duty to go forth and know of these laws. Now, I'll put a pin there and go back to the issue of compromised institutions. Now, the best way to deal with compromised institutions is through legal mechanisms that have been provided. Anything in excess of that is a reformative process that requires the whole mass of people to gather together. So, for example, compromised institutions in terms of electoral efficacy, we would look at the judicial process as one of the ways in which we could resolve that. So, instituting cases in court is not just left towards the aspirants in those electoral disputes. Even citizens who have an issue in terms of whether things were done correctly. And that's why I'd mentioned earlier on the Office of the Ombudsman. It's a very key facet of our government administrative structure. Citizens can approach it in order to find mechanisms through which to exercise redress on illegalities that have been done in the government. Now, the problem we have mostly as a country is that these institutions are there, the laws are also there, but the people, through one reason or another, are not aware of those. There's only so much that can be done, even in terms of civic education. And I can promise you to date, if you go to the wards, you'll find that those barazas in which civic education usually happens are mostly attended by the old men. Young people are nowhere to be found. And that's why for you now, the burden that has been placed on your shoulder is the burden of diligence, to ensure that you actually seek out and read. Article 118 of the Constitution necessitates Parliament to involve public participation in its proceedings. That's why you can watch it on television. That's why you can access those the reports of Parliament. The final thing I'll say on that is this. This is not the best solution. Obviously, we would want a situation where every 3 or 4 years, the public is sensitized on what the Constitution expects. But remember, you must also realize that even for those who are deemed quote-unquote experts of the Constitution keeps on unraveling. There are certain bits and informations on it that have not been interrogated until the recent past. So that means even for you as a citizen, the responsibility becomes yours. Now, the next thing I'd mention is this. Democracy...
The last, eh?
Yeah, the last. Democracy has two primary expectations. The first one is that it is participatory. The second one is that it is representative. So through representative democracy, we find our leaders. Through participatory democracy, we vote, that's one. Two, we get informed. Presently, if anyone Googles Kenya law reports, you will find the database that contains all the laws in the country. In fact, it is such a good database that it tells you which law has been repealed last week, which law has been passed and assented to this week. And then three, there's the Kenya Gazette that also informs citizens. So the issue of lack of information for citizens is not because of unavailability, but it is primarily because of lack of actual involvement. But to the rest of the issues, then we'll wait for what the future will unfold.
All right, I have a lot of rebuttals for that, but I shall...
I think some of the most critical things that we need to do, but please also allow me to respond as I respond with some of the questions that were asked. There's a participant who was asking the missing link. I have always gone to the ground and seen some of us taking problem to the community. The problems are not community owned. They have no association. They go to the extent of them paying them for them to act. and therefore it becomes a business that will not solve the problem. So if you want to know how best to do it, is allow the community to make decisions that best suit them. How do we help the community to know that first, they have a right? Second, that they can exercise that right. But then, can we also draw to Article 3, which gives us the chance to first protect, uphold, and defend the Constitution? And I think that is where the social accountability is coming from. Let's look at Article 10, which is also talking of the values. So when we put this together, then we are able to tell the public if it is not normal for public servants to come to the office late. What do they need to do? So those are kind of the engagements that we have. And if we are able to explain it in a simple way that they are able to understand that if they come late, then this is the recourse. This is the action that you need to take. And then with that, we can also correlate it with the impact so that whenever they see there's a problem, they are able to act. Our problem has been, to some extent, it's a business. To some extent, it's something that we also want to report to donors. But largely, there's a lot of disconnect between the problems that the community are facing and the solutions that we are providing. The other thing that I was just also thinking from, there's issue of divide and rule. It is something that is common because who doesn't want to make money from the community? Kama wewe ndio uko na mdomo, si wewe ndio utasotiwa. So why is the community leaving one person to carry their problem? So some of the things that needs to happen, one, identify with the problem if it is really affecting you. I've not had any community members going to close an office because the person in that office is not acting. I have not seen any community going and telling the governor that on this we are not going to agree. Finally, how do we prioritize projects? And I think that as I respond to Murimi, one of the things that normally happens is most of these governors model projects that will give them more money. So there are a lot of construction. So unless and until the community are able to come out and participate and say, we need an hospital, they will always build it for you. Until and unless when they come to build an hospital which you didn't need and you stop them, they will continue building it for you because it is a business. So it's up to you as a community to stand up and say, this is what we need and this is what we demand of leaders. Finally, as I conclude, if you see a problem, act. Don't wait for another person.
I think it all boils down to public participation. As a community, at this development community-led, why would your governor or even the county government build for you, let's say, there you've said like centers of excellence, whereas the issue at hand, maybe the youth need it's a social hall or even a playground. So when you attend those public participation, of course, while working with the young people, there have been those issues of these notices are either given at night. At times you find it's the Nyumba Kumi Wazees and the old people who actually go to this public participation, and it's like a cartel. By the time they're bringing the document, you don't even have time to analyze it and even give like constructive feedback. But once you attend this public participation, I don't think once you've said, like for us as a youth, maybe in my community, what we need, let's say, is a social hall. I don't think if you also follow it through towards the whole budget cycle process, your governor or even, let's say, your MCA can come and build something contrary. And just the way, if you now, when you have those tools like, let's say, the community scorecard, you can be able to actually score your leaders and actually say, we attended a public participation, these were the needs of the community, but what you guys prioritized were actually contrary to what the community needed.
Okay. I'm just going to go to Musila and then Karen finally. I would ask that within your sentiments you incorporate your closing remarks as well. Musila, you have been asked, we have spoken since time immemorial and nothing has happened. So what happens after people are tired talking and they're frothing at the mouth?
Before I respond to that question, and now I wish we spent our 1 hour on this panel, because I was checked when we started, and I'm checking about the time we are about to end. We are only 15 minutes before our 1 hour. So I don't know why we need to be added out of here. That would be very unfortunate, because all the other sessions in the morning are given an extra minute or another. But besides that,
that is what you call speaking out. He's seen an injustice and he's expressed it, and now it is up to the developers of this event to now speak on the same. Go on,
thank you.
Musila.
I want to start with that question that Murimi asked about the Kipindi syndrome, because they've spoken to it and they've spoken to it very well. But to realize it becomes very easy to do vipindis because most political manifestos are developed in boardrooms by the politicians themselves and presented to us through proclamation on the roadside during campaigns. Nitatengeneza center of excellence, watu wanapiga nduru. Nitatengeneza hospitali, wanapiga nduru tena. The only easy way to bring effectiveness to the manifestos of these politicians is through doing citizen charters. It is us presenting to them what we would want to see and in what fashion. So if we want that center of excellence, it will be defined what we expect to be called a center of excellence. It will not be what they think. A facility, an institution block is not a center of excellence. It is the services. It is how accessible they are. You can build one for Kibra Youth and you build it in Kangemi, where they will not come. I mean, that is unrealistic. But then when it comes from our charter, a citizen charter that we've presented and you've agreed to it, it becomes easy. Then understanding the governor's manifesto, for example, we just from the development of CIDP 3 for Nairobi County, the governor's manifesto has come into that CIDP very prominently. But most of the things, young people don't even know that they were in the manifesto of the governor. They didn't read it. And now it is already in the CIDP. It means when it starts to be implemented, and one of such things is the Biashara Ward Fund, which is already set at 50 million per ward. We already have in the first CIDP an allocation of 750 million. Young people might not be able to know. They don't know how to position themselves to use this money. There is no proper policy, like even was a question for us, La Fund, where we're already consuming money and we don't know who controls that money, how it is going to be used. These are loopholes for misuse of our public resources. So I'm telling young guys, like myself, let us be involved in the manifesto development process. And lastly, the question that I was asked about speaking. One thing about speaking is you do not speak when there is a problem. You're speaking about issues of your community continuously. So everyone feels to own the community. So that when there is need for action, which always comes, there is already enough emotions that are built from the conversations. There's nothing as sweet as a word of action. You've been told, if now this hospital is not completed proper, our children are going to die. So people will not be thinking about the hospital anymore. They will be thinking about the death of their children. They will not be told to go. So the conversation will actually easily inform action. But if we don't talk, or we say we've talked enough, and we don't see any change, I mean, we're not talking to issues that relate to us. We're only talking to issues that have been directed to us.
All right, I'm going to give Karen 1 minute. Unfortunately for our panel, esteemed panel, I might not be able to give you time to do closing remarks. I would want to honor the conveners of the event. So I'm just going to end with you, Karen, and then perhaps you can just wrap this up.
Mine is a challenge for everyone. Let me see how many people have 1,000 followers on any of the socials. Okay, 2,000, 3,000. Any of the socials, all combined, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000. On the issue of uninformed youth, you are here and you are informed. What are you doing about your followers? What are you doing to even educate the other people on what you already know? Because if we sit here and say that sisi ndo tunajua na wengine hawajui, when will we ever get to reach the other people in the grassroots and even the people who are not able to access maybe some of these forums and platforms? So it's a challenge to each of us to see to it that we use our own following our own networks to see that other youth out there are informed too. And maybe this is also another light bulb. In Makueni with ELF and VSO and Imaginable Futures and Firelight Foundation, we are working on a project of informing youth on government interventions, government things, because the issue of uninformed youth came up in one of our forums when we felt like we needed to address it. So we're using the community-driven systems change, where we are bringing together all stakeholders, anyone who works with the youth or works for the youth, government, NGOs, CBOs, youth groups to we bring them on one sitting so that they share the information on what is available for youth and how this youth can tap into it. If this can also be transferred to also your various organizational spaces, it can also work to help youth know and understand the available opportunities for them and even be informed of the available policies, frameworks, and all those procedures and other information that would be relevant to them. To close my closing, I think TOTs have played a very huge role in enhancing and putting out information out there. And the TOTs that have been trained even at ELF have advanced conversations beyond even the boardrooms and sittings. And we also urge anyone out there to, I know if there's some information that you know that maybe someone else doesn't, please pass it over. Speak, as my friend says.
All right. Thank you so much to our panel, to you guys. You have been a wonderful audience, and I think I have been a moderator, but I am also a young person, and I also have been in the space of effecting change through the power of conversations and social media. So this is what I'm going to conclude by saying. I'm sure you've heard it here before, but I'm going to say it in Swahili. Mtego wa panya huwanasa waliokuwemo na wasiokuwemo. Simply put, the complexities of being a part of your democracy go beyond just being here and doing nothing about it. You are not too cool for it, because best believe, when the chickens come home to roost, they will roost for all of you. You will no longer be able to buy yourself out of uncomfortable situations. You won't afford that expensive private hospitals. And let's be very pragmatic. Not everyone is going to leave this country to be able to go access opportunities wherever it is that we're going. The responsibility is not on you because you're here as a figurehead for other people. The responsibility is on you because when it comes to suffering, we have seen how we all collectively suffer. The unemployment situation does not care for how cool you are, for how pretty you are. If you're jobless, you're jobless. Yeah? And that is the reality of why being an active participant in democracy, as boring and as tedious as it may sound, because while we have had all these wonderful sentiments from panelists, I'm going to tell you this. The things that Paul is telling you will take a very long time. Yeah? Going to those government offices every single day to deal with those people every morning is not something that you have time for every other day, and yet you have to make time, because if you do not deal with it, then it will deal with you in place. Okay? So as we live here, let's live here with the mandate, knowing that we are responsible, not for our community, but if we are going to better ourselves, if we are going to guarantee ourselves any chance of succeeding in this nation, I guarantee you, this is what is going to count. Okay? All right. He's really insistent. Let me just allow him.
Thank you. My name is Rongo, and I wanted to correct Paul.
Paul, you're taking stray bullets.
No. It's actually a good thing. You don't have to go to, in order to recall your MP or your MCA, you don't have to go to the High Court. We did a recall exercise on February 2020, and it works like magic. The only thing that is needed, the Elections Act, the section under the Elections Act was repealed that insisted that the MCA or the MP or the senator have to go to the High Court. But under Chapter 6 of the Kenyan Constitution, you have the grounds to recall the state officer. And under Article 260 defines who is a state officer. So with all that information, it's actually very easy to start recalling the leader whom you do not agree with. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I think that brings us to the end of our panel. I'm going to hand over back to the MC. I will, however, say that these panelists are still among us today, so if you have questions, some of them come from organizations that are of much consequence to young people, so do make sure to reach out to them. I have been your host, Stephanie Wachira.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. A round of applause, Stephanie, and the panelists. It's been an honor and a pleasure having you.